It's Clark and Perry
on the case.
Da-na-na-na. Clark and Perry do what it takes. Da-na-na-na. Clark and Perry investigate.
The activities and interests of local artists in the Windy City's finest throughout both Lethbridge and Medicine Hat, Alberta. Available on TELUS, Optic TV, On Demand, VidFlex, YouTube, and more for limited time only. Terms and conditions apply.
Da-na-na-na.
Who sticks out as being an early positive influence in your life?
Early positive influence in my life. Regarding pottery?
Sure.
Or pottery. Early positive influence. I mean, I have so many. I have lots of professors at the university that, definitely, like once I started making things and they're looking at my work, they're always giving me, positive input. And I recall one instance, my professor, Glenn McKinnon, he was a professor of sculpture, told me, "Gary, you're a superstar." I had a good laugh at that, but he said he was. I had one of my pieces in the Helen Christo Gallery, the university, and it was basically a long board, a tall board that I drilled like hundreds of holes into, and I'd stuck these branches, these long curving branches into, and then I painted the branches, and so it was sort of this interesting three-dimensional painting kind of thing. And Glenn said that he saw two girls looking at it and saying, it made my head swell a little bit there. But little things like that, I found, like there's something, other people actually like the things that I'm making. And so I find that I found it very redeeming, I guess, in a way. It's gratifying to know that you're not the only person that likes what you're doing, right?
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah. And I mean, to be fair, like you've spoken a lot about, that kind of drive or gumption from within, right? You have to love what you're doing, but, there's always that awesome feeling when, there's that gratification, like you said,
when somebody
of an outside
somebody
force.
likes what you. I think that's the biggest motivation anybody has, is they do something that other people like. It feels like in some way a service to them, right?
Yeah, a service. Yeah. Right on. Who are you most like in your family?
Again, I don't think I'm like one more than the other necessarily. My mother's always telling me I'm more like my dad, especially if I do something she doesn't like. but I think that I'm an amalgamation of both of them.
Totally.
Physically, I'm probably more like my dad. I have the same, I guess, tendencies as my dad. He drags his heels a little bit.
Oh yeah.
He'll do things like he'll just tend to go quiet whenever there's an argument going on. And so I think I've adopted things like that a lot of times. But then there's a part of me that just cannot be quiet when if I feel like there's some injustice being served. I can't sit there idle, and let that pass. But I think a lot of that feeling, when I feel like when I was a kid, I had instances where I was bullied, and that just it rubbed me wrong. I felt like there was an injustice that had to be addressed. I think that's what took me into pursuing martial arts. That sort of thing persists, right into whatever age you are. There's always people out there that are out to shoot you down, right?
Yeah.
And so having that a little more physical confidence is I think really important. It's a way, having a physical confidence translates into a mental confidence as well. I think you understand that well too.
Yeah, I did karate, a little bit of martial arts as well, and sports.
And all those things factor into developing your own confidence. I think confidence is really important. I think that I'll relate to this idea of I saw this interview on TV years ago. I think it was like 60 Minutes or 2020 or something, and they were interviewing a former mugger on the streets. I think it was New York or something. And they're above an alley. They're doing the interview above an alley, and they're looking out the window at one point. And the mugger was a former mugger, I should say, reformed mugger, was relating how he picked his victims.
Oh wow!
And I thought this was really eye-opening. He looked out the window and he would see people walking by, and it's like this one, person walking really upright, chest, shoulders up, and chest out kind of thing. He said, "I'd never mug him or her or whatever." And then he saw this one person, like looking down at the sidewalk, taking furtive glances left and right here and there. Said, "Oh yeah, easy target." Within seconds, she was mugged in that alley during the interview while they were doing the interview. And that left a lasting impression on me. It's like, people understand body language and confidence. It expresses itself in a lot of ways physically, but
it's a language.
It's a language, yeah. So all of that sort of connects. And I think, like I've done martial arts, and I've even taught a few self-defense seminars, or been there. I've co-taught, these self-defense seminars. And one of the best thing I think that, the participants get out of a self-defense seminar is confidence, a little lift in their confidence that they'd be able to handle a certain type of situation. The reality is 1-2 hour seminar in self-defense is not going to defend you very well in most situations. I think when you're stuck in a fight or flight situation, what happens is you revert right back to the most basic gross motor motions that you can generate. So if your idea of a punch was like this, then that's how you're going to punch, instead of punching like this or even blocking. So in order to make those techniques a part of your instant reaction, you have to practice that like literally thousands of times.
It reminds me of those years and years of doodling, and how that kind of worked itself into the pottery when you finally
I think so, that absolutely is true. Like, so true confidence really comes from repetition and familiarity with what you're doing, I think. Your brain automatically goes much easier into this creative mode when you've already done it a bunch of times, and exactly, you could, as you say, you want to make a object this big with this kind of shape. In your head, you're already imagining all the processes and steps involved with achieving that form. And the same thing applies to like so many different aspects of your life.
And just like something coming to mind for me is this idea of like a balance between being potentially like intellectually confident, but maybe not physically confident, and like a dissonance in there, and just like obviously everybody is unique and they have different propensities and things like that, but I don't know, it was a weird thought.
No, I don't think so. I think whenever, like, if you have a low confidence in a certain subject matter, for instance, I think the best stance to take is one of not assuming but just listening, and knowing that you don't have very much knowledge, and I think that's the best stance to take, and you might be able to learn a thing or two in the process, right?
So looking back on your life, who or what makes you instantly light up?
Who or what makes me light up? I mean, a good movie. and I good movie or music, good comedy. I think comedians are some of the most talented individuals, like in terms of mentally out there, because they are improvising on the fly, and they're coming up with jokes as events happen around them, basically. there's a versatility in a really good comedian that allows them to transition a little more easily than, say, a dramatic actor into comedy. A comedian can transition into, say, a dramatic role, or you know, I think a lot of different roles because of their sort of understanding, their innate understanding of human triggers, I guess, whether it's how to make a person laugh, or what makes people sad, or you know, what causes anger. I think comedians have tapped into this sort of thing. And so I'm not going to name any one comedian or whatever. And I think comedians get a bad rap lately because, you know, the essence of comedy often involves insulting somebody in some way. Like dig. A good comedian can make an insult that's kind of, you know, funny for even the party that they're directing it at, right? Yeah, so it's a difficult thing to navigate, I think, in this day and age, much more so than it was, say, 30 years ago or so.
For sure. It reminds me of the phrase, like, a lot of truth is said in jest.
Yeah,
you know, like,
yeah.
There's got to be some element of truth to it, maybe?
Yeah,
some
element, absolutely.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that, yeah. Things that make me light up, though. Yeah, I think, like, if you're an artist, it's good to let lots of different things light you up, whether or not it's a good book or music or a movie or a painting or whatever. I think you should be cultivating this idea that everything has, you know, a potential for inspiration. Yeah, so like I have an extensive music collection. I've watched so many movies, maybe too many sometimes, I think. But I feel like, yeah, I'm always searching for the next little inspiration, whether it's an inspiration to make me laugh or think deeper or have a better understanding of something. And so, yeah, I'm not one of those people that say, I'll never listen to this genre of music or that kind of movie, or I watch them all. I tend to say that there's something, like, I might be picky about a particular movie within the genre, but I'm not picky about the genre. You know, genres are, you know, and the same thing applies to food too. I feel like I sympathize with people that are really picky eaters, and they might not feel like there's anything to be sympathetic about, but if you're a really picky eater that says, I don't like this without even having tried it,
right?
And there are a lot of people out there, right?
Yeah.
Their mind hasn't opened up to the idea that it might taste good. If I only approach it with the idea that it might taste good, right? And I had a childhood friend that said he hated liver, for instance.
Oh yeah.
I feel like my mom's a really good cook. She learned you know, how to cook really well, and so whether it's Japanese food or European food or whatnot. And one day when I was a kid, we invited this boy over that said he hated liver, and we fed him some meat. We said it was a steak, right? And so he was eating the steak and he was enjoying it, right? He enjoyed the steak. It was a good, yeah, it was good. And then after he's done, we said, that was liver. And he goes, ooh. And I was like, wait, how can you justify that reaction after just saying that you enjoyed it, that you thought it was good? That's a terrible I think he's locked into a very closed mindset about what he likes, right? I think that's a very difficult block to get out of. As an artist, you should always be trying to open your mind up to new taste and new ideas. But I find that with me, I'm always approaching things from also a science background as well. So if you know, lots of my artistic friends might hate me for not believing in astrology, for instance, or you know, this sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
Not that I don't think that astrology has nothing to offer. I think there's plenty of practical advice to be found in astrological readings, so to speak, or that sort of thing. the problem is that it's a very generalized advice, right? So it applies to just about everyone
For sure.
at some point in time, right? And that's the way I look at it. Yeah, if you're going to tell me there's a mystical power driving something, it might be there. I try to keep my mind open, but there's for the most part, no physical evidence that that sort of thing is occurring.
For sure.
So I try to be a little more analytical about where the power is, or what is this thing that you're describing as the mystical power. Being a martial artist, also, I was also very deep into the idea of key energy. Now, I don't think of key energy as sort of like this thing that is a readable thing, but I think that everybody has this energy. In Japanese or in Chinese, most Asian cultures have a sort of analog to this idea of key energy. In Japanese, ki, I think, literally translates into willpower or whatever. It's not exactly the same,
right?
But willpower. Where does your will come from? Like, how does anybody explain that, right?
Yeah.
Is it just a random result of chemical reactions within a biological body, right? Is it just biochemistry?
Yeah.
These are questions that we might never really get to the root of, I guess.
For sure.
I've always thought that it is a bit of a miracle that anybody lives and breathes and exists at all.
Totally.
Right? Yeah. Why are you, the particular personality, inhabiting your body right now at this moment in this particular period of time? And all of that turns into a giant mystery, right? It is a bit of a miracle, I think.
And you have to, I think there's an interesting side to that where you have to do the things, you have to try the things, you got to try the liver, to figure out maybe the answer's there.
Exactly.
Maybe there's answers in the things.
Exactly.
Right on. Yeah, I don't know if we have time to dive into that.
Okay,
but so we'll go on to the next question.
We'll try a cooking program next.
We did do cooking.
Oh, did you?
With somebody? Yeah, it
nice.
was awesome. If you weren't in your current profession, what would you be doing?
If I wasn't doing pottery,
would you still be doing agricultural science?
Maybe. I don't know. Right now, that seems like it's not really on the table. I think I would have tried to find something else to do. Now, I would have still been doing art, I think, probably, of some kind, whether it's painting or sculpture of some other sort. If I didn't discover pottery again, 5 years ago, I think painting would have probably been the primary, substitute for pottery, I think. Because there are similarities, I feel, in terms of the freedom that the medium offers. There's also restrictions, of course, right? But I feel like painting and pottery, wheel throwing, have this freedom to do the infinite form, so to speak, right? And it's like every painting is slightly different from the next. And I'm always looking for that unique experience, I guess, within. So there are times when I will take a break from throwing pottery, and I'll say, well, I want to do something a little bit different next time. And I sort of go over it in my head. What can I do to make the work a little different from the last stuff that I did? And pottery being pottery, there's always a limitation on what you can make, I suppose, on a wheel. And so I've always also played with the idea of hand building and that sort of thing. There are definitely practical pieces of work that you cannot throw on a wheel as easily. And so hand building is definitely an option. So I've experiment with that. I'm always looking for new ideas. I'm always looking for new glazes. I feel like I'll be a forever student in terms of the glaze formation. There's so many chemical recipes and reactions that are still well beyond my understanding. I wish I had the knowledge of there's this one YouTube ceramicist named John Britt, who's very famous for his very in-depth analyses of different glaze chemicals and how to create your own glaze recipe. And yeah, I aspire to that kind of knowledge to some degree. I feel like, but my biggest preoccupation is just in the form right now. Yeah, that's just one step in the whole process. Glazes are so important. They lend color and surface texture to your work, and if you figure out how to make a compelling glaze, half of your battle is done on the forming of ceramic work.
I know. I mean, it's like you said earlier. If you're not learning, if you're not learning, you're not living. So it sounds like you're gonna keep living. You're learning that stuff. How would you define the relevance of your work in your community?
Well, I think for a long time, like since the Industrial Revolution, people have been looking for wares that they can sell that are cheaper and cheaper to produce. And there's no, I think, that applies to this day and age as well. And in this sort of time of mass production, people lose an appreciation for the handmade, for things that are considered artistic or artwork. And I feel like I have a bit of a responsibility to sort of say, hey, maybe we should sort of pay attention to things that are handmade again. Once say the machinery breaks down and we are no longer mass producing all these different instant objects out of plastic or what have you. Isn't there something important in maintaining the skill to create these functional things or artworks that have been with civilization for millennia, thousands of years? I think the oldest instances they've found so far of pottery are in China now. They once thought it was in Japan, like the early Jomon period, about 15,000 years ago. And I mean, those aren't even Japanese people at that point. 15,000 years ago, they're they call it the Jomon people, and they're probably ancestors of the Ainu, or the native Japanese, that still are in Japan. But again, they're marginalized. They're like the natives of Canada, right? They're kind of on the margins of society. Only recently, there's been a resurgence in sort of a desire to preserve the Ainu culture, but so much damage has been done that way. Just like in any society, the Ainu have been kind of, whether overtly or not overtly, like set to the side, blacklisted, kind of, and every society does that. I think every culture has done that to somebody, I think. So there's no justification. But so yeah, back to this idea of this ancient technology, this ability to fire clay into a hard, durable, sort of permanent piece of work. Yeah, there's something there, I think, that I hope I help in preserving and in continuing that legacy of ceramic work. It's comforting to me to think that I might be making things that will last 1,000 years into the future, right? Longevity. Longevity is sort of like a hope, I guess, with the work. And I know lots of people think, oh, that's pretty shallow. you just want to be remembered. But I think everybody wants to be remembered to some degree, to leave some kind of legacy, right? We're here for such a relatively brief span of time, and it'd be nice to be remembered in some way, maybe. Yeah. When you're dead, you don't care, though.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
that's only a concern for the living, right? People wonder about how they will be remembered. I think it's important to think that way, just because if you want to be remembered well, hopefully you're behaving well as well.
Exactly.
Like you're being a good human being in some way. So,
But no, what you were saying about the relevance that it brings, and that kind of handcrafted element of it, and reminded me of oh no, I lost it.
Oh no!
I lost
okay.
my thought. I lost my thought.
Yeah, I do that too.
Oh,
sorry.
No, you're good. Not your fault.
Handcrafted.
Handcrafted. It was about like the no.
Oh no, it's gone.
It's
Oh,
gone.
no.
It's completely gone.
Oh God, sorry.
No, it's all good. I guess we will move on to my last question, which is just, when can we expect your next work?
Well, I have sort of applied for a show with the local, what is it, the artist collective called Trapdoor. And there's an exhibition happening in September, I believe, called Carrying Baggage. I submitted an idea for it, but I have a bag that I want to put a pot inside of. Like it's like not a bag, it's like a little suitcase kind of thing, a briefcase kind of thing. And I want to throw a big pot and then squish it to fit inside the confines of the suitcase, or the box, so to speak. And my idea was that the idea is to reflect the idea of conforming to expectations, or pre-visualized idea of what you should be, I guess. And I want to sort of put into the expression that it's very difficult and sometimes unnatural to conform to the expectation, right? I think it's important for people to be who they are. I feel like that's a lesson that took too long for me to learn. But I mean, I'm happy where I am now. I'm glad that, and I don't want to downplay the idea that my studying science for decades wasn't beneficial to my current art practice. I think it's extremely important now.
And even just to the way that you think, it sounds like.
I feel like I would be a very different artist if I had jumped into art school right out of high school and not had these other experiences. And so, I mean, you have to approach it as from the perspective of it's a huge advantage for yourself that you had all these experiences, and you're now able to sort of apply them in some way, indirectly, into your artwork.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Maybe directly in some ways too.
Right on. It came back to me.
Okay.
And it was just that idea of like language, and so this idea of handcrafted things, and the language around that, and
That's
keeping
a great question.
and keeping that going.
There is an expression that goes on in artwork. I think that's it's nonverbal, right? Of course, there is something about looking at something that aesthetically pleases you and gets your brain moving in different directions. And because I think that aesthetic language is it's more ambiguous than verbal language, although verbal language is arguably very ambiguous as well at times, right? But I think the language of art is very ambiguous. It can mean so many different things for different people. And so,
which also reminds me of like body language.
Can
be very ambiguous.
I think at the same time that serves as sort of this hub from which all sorts of different ideas can emerge. And that in itself is a great way to sort of instigate conversation and help guess, help cultivate ideas, different ideas about the work, about the people around you, how it relates to everything, I guess. And so, yeah, I'm happy that I'm able to make art that sort of makes people go, oh, I like that. That means the world to me. I think. Yeah.
Awesome. I think that is all the time we have for today. So yeah, thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. I'm Perry. Clark isn't here today, but this has been Gary Uchikura. Bye.
It's Clark and Perry on the case. Clark and Perry do what it takes. Clark and Perry investigate.
The activities and interests of local artists in the Windy City's finest throughout both Lethbridge and Medicine Hat, Alberta. Available on TELUS, Optic TV, On Demand, VidFlex, YouTube, and more for limited time only. Terms and conditions apply.